Hi, welcome to Dominate Your Day. I'm Dana Williams. I'm an executive coach who loves helping leaders discover their authentic purpose. Join me here on Dominate Your Day for conversations that ignite internal revolution and empower difference makers to lead from their strengths. Let's together create lasting impact. Josh Elledge is a U.S. Navy veteran. He's launched upmyinfluence.com, which helps agencies, consultants, coaches, and other high ticket B2B service providers skyrocket their sales. But he also was really passionate about serving others. And I think you're going to learn some of his tips and how his career went different ways, but how it always had this kind of red thread of consistency in serving others. All right, Josh, I am looking forward to this conversation for several reasons. You have an amazing background and it looks like it did some zigs and zags, but then it kind of got into a really cool space. Um, so tell the audience a little bit about
Mhm.
yourself and how you got on this journey where you are right now.
Yeah. Right out of high school, I joined the United States Navy, became a Navy journalist. I was a broadcast journalist. And, one person that absolutely transformed my life, and he would have no clue. I mean, he's dead now, but Staff Sergeant Adrian Cronauer, which you may or may not know that name, but he was the subject of a popular comedy slash movie with Robin Williams called Good Morning Vietnam. That was Adrian Cronauer, and so what's that?
And you got to be mentored by him. Is that what you're saying?
It's not like
Or
Miyagi and Danielson kind of mentoring. He came in for a couple of days to my
okay,
journalist.
well,
So
you
I was
saw
at
him.
Dinfos, studying journalism and broadcast journalism for the armed forces. And Adrian Cronauer came in, very outspoken, very outspoken. I remember that. And but there was one thing that he said. See, up until that day, I looked at serving audiences as kind of a fun job because I was a kid at the time, right? But then when he came and spoke, he talked about the sacred obligation that we have and, that our honor is based on our truthfulness and our honesty and being able to make hard decisions, which if you know his story, I mean, that was, he got in a lot of hot water for some of the decisions he made at the time during the Vietnam War as a journalist, as a journalist in uniform, and I use uniform in air quotes if you've seen the movie, but
Yes.
history vindicated him. And that was his point is, there's going to be times when you may be asked to propagandize, and you have to use your conscience on that and find a way to get the mission and the job done while still honoring your integrity. And that if you violate your integrity, you have violated your trust with the audience. And but that said, if you can work with that heart, you will be able to impact hearts and minds more so than so many other roles right now. It really is like when you have an audience, and you are a speaker or you are a teacher, or presenter, or whatever. Don't take that position lightly, and don't think that, oh, I'm just here to get my stuff done. No, what you say might have a lifetime of impact on one person in that room, and that is a job well done if you can do that. But when you work and you do that work with that mindset, it really does affect how you're able to perform. So that was kind of what led me to a life of trying to discover how I do that. Because I was in the Navy for 5 years, then I went to college, then I started a string of internet or kind of tech-based companies, and one of them finally took off, and that was Savings Angel, which I have now been a syndicated newspaper columnist. I've been in the media over 2,500 times. I study and lead on consumer savings. I am the guy who can get you a deal, hookup, or upgrade on anything in life, and that's my persona that I've done with Savings Angel, my other company, for all this time. So, the 15 to 1,000 TV appearances, probably 1,000 radio appearances. Well, actually, it's over 1,000 now. So it's over 3,000. And then, like I said, my syndicated newspaper column is in 14 newspapers I've been writing forever. So now I was doing that work, and I got to a point where, and sometimes this happens for those of us who are founders, where things start to get a little easy. Like it's everyone's got to work their tail off at the beginning, but then usually you get a little bit of lift. You start bringing in some good people, and life gets a little easier. So I just started doing pro bono work in my local community. So I started working with a lot of veteran-owned business owners, minority-owned, women-owned business owners, and just serving on boards, doing pro bono mentoring, just opportunities to just give back, right, and do that proactively. Well, see, a funny thing happens, and I think anyone who's done similar work like what I've just described can probably nod their head. That is likely going to lead to opportunities. When you're just out circulating, doing good, you're going to build relationships with other people that for whom, for doing good is also part of their core value system. So you start circulating with other leaders like that, you're going to get opportunities. It just happens. So sure enough, I unintentionally started a PR consultancy and media consultancy because that was what I got good at. We created a 6-figure a month company with Savings Angel, and I did zero paid ads, no marketing, no advertising. Everything I did was go out on stages, serve, give generously. Don't pitch and sell from the stage ever. Just give it all away. Be as generous as you can and treat audiences like adults. And they know how to find you, man. It's just like, and when you give them the space to do that on their own and they feel like it's their decision, then you usually are working with a more engaged audience anyway, because they could feel like it's all their idea and you're not the one that's shoving it down their throat. Anyway, so this was about 7 years ago that I started doing some pro bono stuff, and then that led to some. It's kind of funny because I was kind of shifting into PR. I wasn't, I didn't go to college for public relations, so I felt kind of a little unqualified. And I remember talking with my friend who was the head of the PRSA here in Central Florida, and I said, "Someone wants to pay me to do PR. I'm not a PR person. Can I take that money?" He goes, "Man, you better take that money." So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a PR consultant, I guess. And so I was doing that for a little bit of time. And we were doing a lot of work in the fintech space and personal finance and the money world. And one thing that we discovered is that a lot of brands, particularly at the time, were really hot on working with influencers. And I was a little bit of an influencer myself. I certainly knew a lot of people that were way bigger than me. So I would start connecting the dots in that world. Well, my list of friends kind of said, "Oh man, Josh, I appreciate it, but they're just going to pitch me their affiliate program. And man, I like you, but I'm not really interested in, just hearing another pitch." And so I kind of dissected that a little bit. And I thought, well, how can I improve that? And then I remember asking a few of my influencer friends, like, how did you work out these best partner relationships that you now have longstanding relationships with? And they would say, and this was the pattern I found, is it was organic. It just kind of naturally felt like it came together. Like we just became friends. And then we decided, so we became friends first, business second. And I thought, there's something to that. And then I thought about how I got all of my best business. And again, this is kind of in an account-based sales. Sorry, it's a long story. But I thought about, it's like, well, where did my best clients came from? Relationships, right? It's just you're serving with other people pro bono. You're on a board. You're in a speaker lounge. You're in the VIP lounge. You're just kind of, just talking, just getting to know people and helping out and being a nice person. And like, well, I love business when it comes across like that. And then I was like looking at, as a consultancy, I'm like, well, maybe I should grow and scale this thing. And I was looking at all of the ways to do that normally, like what was the conventional advice for how to grow an agency? Well, Dana, at the time, especially, and I don't know, it's changed. I mean, it's changed a little bit because it's just not working so well anymore. And it was a lot of conventional lead gen, Facebook ads and LinkedIn Sales Navigator and sending cold email and just slamming people's inboxes and spray and pray, baby. And it just like, that just didn't feel authentic to me because I don't like to be sold at that way. Who do I like doing business with? My friends. And I don't like being pitched at. I don't like being sold. You do that to me, I'm kind of out of there. Like, or at least I'm going to check out. Right. And so what I did is I said, well, wait a minute. I've been podcasting. Matter of fact, I started podcasting back in 2007. Like there was iTunes, basically, or it's Apple, before Apple Podcast. And so I would I would take my radio segments, I'd record them into an MP3 format, upload them to my server, hand code my own RSS feed, submit that to Apple, and then I had a podcast all of a sudden. And then I officially started going, hey, but I've been podcasting for quite a while. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What would happen if I just use my podcast to serve the heck out of my industry? Just give, be not a thought leader, but really take the platform and shine a spotlight on other people in just true noble intention, just do good in the world, give back. And Dana, I'm sure you can imagine what happened. My networking all of a sudden went on hyperspeed and I started getting a lot of great business. And then I had more of my clients are like, the PR is all well and good, Josh, but how do I do what you're doing? And I'm like, well, I don't launch podcasts or anything like that. And so anyway, we figured something out. We helped them out. We consulted, and they ended up earning 175K in their first 90 days because what we did is she had like a $25,000 mastermind. And I said, well, why don't we find your ideal people? We're going to celebrate them. And this is, by the way, we're going to talk about this a little bit, I would imagine. And it's kind of this go-giver kind of energy where you're noble intent, lead in generosity, earn a relationship, never pitch sell, always be there, always be a good person, and then just kind of watch what happens. Because if you're circulating with a high caliber of people, leaders use generosity. By the way, for our friend that's listening, man, I'm getting off the story, aren't I? Leaders use generosity to recognize one another. That's the language we listen for. Amateurs deal in scarcity, and they are the ones that are pitching and selling. And you recognize them on Facebook because they're constantly pitching and selling their thing on Facebook. It just comes across to me as a little bit desperate. I don't listen. I'm not an expert. That might run contrary to what some people believe. Some people might not like what I just said. It's just my dumb opinion, right? But we've taken that dumb opinion and we've now taken this podcast concept. We've launched over 250 podcasts. And now I'm a fractional chief revenue officer for those folks that do account-based sales, big ticket, and they also have to have some pretty decent authority in what they do. They're the kind of people that when they show up in a green room, they don't have to sell. They're just good at what they do, and they show up and they serve, and they naturally get business. Man, to our friend that's listening right now, if that's you, do not hit stop on this podcast. Cancel what you're doing for the next however long is left in the time because I've got some good ideas for you.
And this is what I'm excited about, Josh, because my passion is helping people birth their purpose and use it every day. And as you know, we're in a society now, in a culture where we're trying to figure out what's real and what's real works. And just
Mm-hmm.
exactly in your story. And that was the red thread of consistency I heard in your
Yeah.
story, was the authenticity. I was in the Navy, and I did this, and
Yeah.
then this happened, and then this happened. But there was this relationship thing that kind of wove through the whole thing. And you found that spot, that authentic spot where you can help serve the world.
Yeah. And I know it's a little bit of a overused term right now. So, what I'll just say on authenticity is like you either have it or you don't, right? It's either in your heart or it's not. And if you're not there, it's probably because you're maybe operating with a little bit of fear or scarcity. And look, we've all been there at the early stages of business. So I want to make sure that I'm coming across with a little bit of empathy there because I know what it's like to listen, I got to keep the bills on. I got to keep the lights on. I remember my first week or two, like my first couple of months with Savings Angel, I got to a point where um, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. My power was going to get turned off, and it was March in Michigan. I just didn't have the money. I had a new startup. I had kind of lost a contracted position that I had, and it's like all of my chips were in on Savings Angel working or not. A local radio station reached out. I don't know how they found me, a local radio station, a salesperson reached out to me and asked if I wanted to advertise on their radio station. And I said, I don't have any money, but I wish I could. But I'll tell you, I have some background in radio. I would love to be of service if I could. And maybe, if you'd be willing to test me out on a quick little segment or something like that, here's what I can provide your listeners. And again, 100% on value to listeners, right? Now we got to talking about that, and they're like, "Well, look, we'll run an experiment and maybe do something on RevShare." So it was a local Christian broadcaster, JQ99 in Holland, Michigan, and they had me on the air for a morning segment, and I'm so grateful. Mandy, Troy, and Trevor, and so we did a segment, and this was back before, like, I don't even think I had internet on my phone at the time, right? And so I had no idea. I did the segment at the station, no idea on what's going on. I drive back home, and I had earned just enough to pay my heating bill that was due in 3, 4 days. So it's like, when you're driven, like, I was kind of feeling like this feels like where I need to be. Like, this feels so in alignment with who I am and all of my past experiences. When it kind of comes together, I think we've seen this when we see a performer on stage, and you just know, you like, they are doing what God or the universe designed them to do. Like, we just saw Mamma Mia last night, and those performers last night, the singers, the company. I mean, you just saw some of those people are like, this is what they are wired to do. This is why they're on the earth, to perform in the way that they just did that. Everyone feels it. And so now it's like, when you're around someone like that, and that's, to your point on, knowing your strengths and working within your strengths, my experience is that people will coalesce around that, and they will support you in that. There's just something about someone who's operating in that level of energy, and people will either assist you or they'll get out of the way. But they can't deny that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. It's such a powerful dynamic.
And it starts with your own mindset, right? Because if you think you can't do it, then they're going to feel that around you, right?
Yeah.
If you think you can't. So, how did you overcome some of these obstacles? I heard the obstacle of, oh my gosh, I'm down to my last dime. I can't, I
Sure.
need to advertise, but here I can go use this. I heard a pivot there of, well, I can do this. So, how did you get yourself? Because I think so many people on this road to alignment, finding their alignment, finding where they were meant to be, I think there's a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
And so, share some encouraging words about that, and what brought you to think,
Sure.
okay, there's something else I can do here. I
Yeah.
can't pay for an ad, but I can sure speak.
Um, so, so I'd say here's kind of my energy. First off, let me just share the practical reality of my situation, which I would not advise for anyone. Do not put yourself in this position. There's a line from an officer and a gentleman when Richard Gere goes, "I got nowhere else to go." That was my situation. Like, I burned the bridges, or burned the ships, and I forget where that comes from. But I remember I read that analogy in, like, Entrepreneurship for Dummies or something like that back in the day, and they talked about that burn the ships attitude, and I'm like, okay. Honestly, I would never advise someone to do this, put themselves through this, because it was way too much stress, and my poor family. Anyway. So there was that. But it really is, um, soul searching, right? And so I would start with an assessment, maybe. I think,
Mhm.
Dana, you
That's
might
it.
have some
Yes.
help around that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's
So
going to be
yeah,
really
the strengths
helpful.
assessment you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one
Yeah.
thing.
Do you know
I
there's
think
another thing I want to throw, and I'm sure you know about this too. Toward the end of one of my favorite books of all time, Atomic Habit,
yeah,
toward the end of this
absolutely.
book, he really starts to get into answering the question of, what should you be doing? And, I think a lot of us, we're given this advice: do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? And I don't mean to belittle that. I mean, it sounds good and stuff, but the reality is that may or may not be a good plan, right? If you love to play acoustic guitar and you want to make money at it, you can go for it. But that's, there's a lot of starving artists out there. And what I'll share is that even if you want to make it big an acoustic guitar performer or whatever, the business side of that is going to be just as important as the performance side of that and the artist side of it. You have to be network. You have to work the business side of it. Otherwise, you won't be able to afford to do what you're so passionate about. So I think what Adam Grant says, is he says, listen, or I'm sorry, James, not Adam Grant, James Clear. He says, you should try to find the things. Yeah, if you love it, great. That's awesome. Hopefully that's great. But another thing that you might want to look for is what are the things that you can do that other people get tired of or bored with kind of quickly, but it's still valuable. In other words, people get paid or make money doing that thing, but for whatever reason, like other people look at that and go, oh my God, there's no way I could ever do that. Like, for example, like for me, doing my own accounting, ugh, like taxes, ugh, there's no way, right? So I hire people for that. So, operational leadership, I'll do it if I have to, but I don't enjoy it. It's the kind of stuff that's a little bit of a tax on me professionally. And I start to, as a business owner, I start to dread going into work if that's the work that I have to do. But then it's weird. For whatever reason, the way that I'm wired, I can podcast 4 or 5 hours a day. I don't know why. I don't know why. Other people would look at that and go, because it's like when I tell people I do a daily podcast, immediately I see, and I see this exasperated look on their face. And they're like, how do you do a daily show? Especially like if they're a weekly podcaster and they're like, oh, it's so much work, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, it's kind of like Captain America, man. It's like you just keep getting up and you expand your circle. Yes, going from 0 to 1 episode a week was a big stretch for me. And then going from 1 episode a week to 3 episodes a week was a big stretch for me. Growth is in the, is outside the comfort zone. That's really a good principle, right? As long as you could like, well, I seem to have a little bit more strength than other people and doing it at this level. What would happen if I pushed a little harder and let's just see what's possible? It's like when we think about the greatest athletes, the greatest musicians out there. Well, you look at an amazing, guitarist, right? And they're like, how do they do that? Well, it's kind of mostly the 3,000 hours. It's like they had the wherewithal to stick with it and keep doing it when other people gave up. Champions, and this is the biggest aha moment from Atomic Habits for me, was champions do it bored. They they keep showing up at the gym when everyone else is like, it's not as fun anymore. For whatever reason, the champions are like, yeah, I keep it fresh or whatever, but I'm not bored. But I recognize that results are linked to daily micro decisions, daily habits, right? So the habits are much easier for someone that's just prone to do that. So that's why, working within your find out, discover what your superpowers are. And then here's the part 2 of this. Stop doing all the other stuff. So now I work as a chief revenue officer for all of our clients. So our clients tend to be pretty good consultants. Like they're usually 6 and 7 figure consultants. They've usually been they're in their 40s and 50s. Like they've been doing what 60s, but usually not. We don't work with too many people in their 20s. Like usually it's people that have been in their profession for a little, like they know some people, they know some things. And so if they've got that, like they know what their strengths are, I'm like, listen, you've got the exact energy I need. Now what I need to do is if you're account-based sales and you're a go-giver, I can keep you busy for the rest of your life as long as you are committed to staying a go-giver and just be yourself. Don't sell, because I'm never going to intro someone to you if you're going to sell at them. But I'm going to intro your ideal connections to you if you believe in collaborative relationships, if you believe in giving first, if you believe in leading with noble intent. Listen, if what I just described feels like you, stop doing any form of lead gen, because who you are competing with are people who don't believe like you. You are competing with people that believe in a spray and pray approach. You're competing with cheap labor that you'll never be able to work at that level, right? You're competing with AI. All right. Even if you leverage the AI tools, you're competing with other amateurs that are leveraging those tools. Please honor who you are professionally and build your business with class. Don't be slamming the DMs. Don't be slamming the cold email. Don't be low key selling on Facebook in a desperate manner. I mean, it's cool to tell stories about who you are and what you do, but lead in generosity at all times. But like I said, do it in a way that I don't know where I'm meandering to. Can I just?
No, but
You're just
but here's
talking.
what it is.
I
I
don't even
know
remember what the
exactly what
original
it is.
question was.
I bet if we did your strengths, I bet communication would be number
Yeah,
one
well,
or
yeah,
close to it.
I
And
don't
and
know. Okay,
people with
can I share this? Um, Someone might look at, and I'm not saying this show is a demonstration of my ability to do this, but there might be times that you might look at my body of work and go, okay, the guy's probably pretty good at what he does. That is not at all because I was innately talented at that thing. I am not. I promise you that if you go back and look at my first TV segments, if you go back and listen to my first podcast, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself because I was pretty awful. In fact, I'll tell you what inspired me to go headfirst into podcasting. It was listening to Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income. And I was like, I wanted to listen to Pat's first dozen episodes. So I started at the beginning. And I'll just tell you right now, I don't know if these episodes are still up or not, or if he's redone them or whatever. Dana, I don't know if you know who Pat Flynn is. In the podcasting world, he's kind of an old school guy. But anyway, um, his first episodes were not good. Same thing with like Tim Ferriss. And like there's some other ones. Like if you go, YouTubers, go look at like big YouTubers' first videos. Most of them are pretty crappy. They're really bad. That should give you hope because, again, a la Captain America, you just keep getting up. You just keep showing up. So the power is in the doing, right? Arthur Schopenhauer said, do the thing, have the power. So if you do something, it's like the Beatles. The Beatles truly stepped into their greatness when they went to Germany because they had time to be on stage. And Malcolm Gladwell documents this in, I think, The Tipping Point, right? Where he talks about, I could be, forgive me if I'm not sourcing correctly, but it's like Bill Gates at the computer lab, the Beatles in Hamburg, Germany. They put, many, 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 many hours of stage time every day in. And as a result, they really got good quickly. So if you do podcasts and you do a couple of hours a day and you fast forward a year, guess what's going to happen a year from now? See, it's like most of us, we look at the granular atomic habit activity, the micro decisions. It's like I'm learning bass guitar right now. I started this a year ago. When I started, I had kid fingers. I sounded terrible. And I thought, oh, I'm making all these noises. This is terrible. I don't know how people do this. But then I listened to a book and I don't remember the title of it. Sorry, but there's one thing I love these. I like kind of like big aha moment from every book I read. Right. So the big one from this book, it was about like how to learn anything kind of thing, and this was so huge for me. For learning an instrument or learning about anything. What the author said was this, and this is the light just clicked for me. It says, if you're learning an instrument or whatever it is, you're learning a foreign language, right? You are going to feel at the beginning like this isn't working. You are going to feel at the beginning like I'm not learning. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what your conscious brain thinks about the thing. If you have your fingers moving and you're playing along and you're doing the activity, your subconscious, unconscious brain is picking it up. It doesn't matter what your conscious brain thinks or not. If you put in the hours, you are learning. So that should give everybody hope. If there's something that you want to master and it feels insurmountable, or it feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know, like, how do I ever get to that level? I understand the imposter syndrome, right? I've been there. I've I felt like an imposter in pretty much everything that I've worked at, but you just keep showing up. You will get better at the thing. So again, discover your strengths, do the thing, keep doing the thing. Don't give up. Like, especially when it feels like, when you get to that point when everyone else gives up, you keep going, and all of a sudden you were in the top 50%. Now you're in the top 20%. Now you're in the top 5%. Now you're in the top 1%. Dana, we were kind of joking about this before we started recording. I am mediocre at most things in life. I really am. I mean, and that's even being generous, but there are a few things I would dare say I'm probably one of the best in the world at. It's just a couple of things. And I probably would say there's probably one thing in particular. I have never met anyone who is my peer. And that's,
What would that be?
well, so it's kind of what I do professionally. I build systems to facilitate high-level introductions for go-giver leaders who fit the persona that I talked about earlier. And I leverage platform, specifically podcasts. Now, because of that, and I've been doing this for a long time, I have an enormous network too, because I stayed in the game. Here's another thing. I want to share this before I continue on talking about what I do. In the beginning, whenever you start something, you don't have the professional credibility. It's harder at the beginning. And the more you do that thing, the more people you get to know, the more relationships you get to build, the more trust you get to build in the industry. Remember these 3 words. Write this down, please. Put it on a sticky note. If you're feeling frustrated, if you feel like you're in the sucky part of business right now, it exists. We've all been through it. But remember these 3 words. It gets better. It really does. And I should say it gets easier is actually more accurate. You will find, I don't know if you remember I don't know what Harry Potter movie it was, maybe number 6 or something like that. But Harry is given lucky juice. I don't know, polyjuice or whatever it's called. I don't know. I don't even remember that. See, I tell a lot of stories. I don't know the details. Not a good storyteller, Josh. Storytelling, not one of my best. I'm mediocre at best on. But he drinks the lucky juice, and everything just works out in his favor. He just says and does these unusual things. But see, it's these leaders that have been doing something for 20, 30 years. It's like they just have this energy. They don't have to think. It's unconscious genius at work. They don't have to think about what they're doing. They're just, the energy does everything for them. And then they have the trust and the reputation, that again, they can step into. I'll illustrate this. I've gone to events where I've just been a face in the crowd. Nobody knows me. I don't know anybody. It's not like I'm a nobody there, right? That's one experience. Then I've also gone to events where I've been the keynote speaker. And that's a completely different experience, because afterwards everyone's like, oh, can I get a selfie with you? Oh, can we, can I pick your brain? Da, 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 da. Like you get like all of these opportunities just fall in your lap. Okay. I think we all wish for that to happen immediately. I'm telling you, that is an inevitability if you stay the course. Just pick a thing, become the best in the world at it, and it's an inevitability. You will create the results, because if someone else did it, you can do it. There's nothing that's ever, it's like, I used to be a heavy dude. I used to weigh 230. I don't weigh that much. I'm like, about ready to hit my 150s right now. So when I lost my big weight back in the day, and this is a while ago, it's not a good show. The Biggest Loser. It's not, like I said, I don't recommend it, because there's a lot of reasons why that's unhealthy. But I was inspired by the fact that these people were able to put the work in and get results, even though, again, ethically, I don't believe, in some of the aspects of that. But then I forget what season it was, but they lost a bunch of weight, and then one of the final episodes is that they all had to run a marathon. And I'm like, what? These big people who are now less big are running a marathon? That's only for professional athletes. Only professional athletes run marathons. Well, you know what I found out, Dana, is most people could probably run a marathon if you're in generally good health, right? You may not be able to run the whole thing, but you can finish it. And so that became a goal for me. And I said, if they can do it, I can probably do it. And I got a book by Hal Higdon, And it's basically the beginner's guide to running a marathon. It's kind of a couch to marathon kind of thing. And it took a little while. And at first I couldn't even run around my block. And I got winded and I'm like, oh, this sucks. There's no way. And then I was able to do it. And then I was able to run to the pond and back, which was 2 miles. And then I was able to, and when I did this, Dana, I got back and I'm getting all emotional on this podcast interview. I got to a point where I could run to the back gate of our subdivision, our big neighborhood area development and back, and that was 4.5 miles. And when I was able to do that without stopping, in other words, I could run the whole thing. And I was granny jogging, but when I could keep running that whole distance and get back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing how our bodies and our brains and our support network will rise to support us. Our body will accommodate and will adapt to meet us in this vision that we have for ourselves, this fire that we have. That, it's like if you want it bad enough, you'll find the people. It's kind of like when I had nowhere else to go at the beginning. I found the opportunities because I had no choice. So I had to spend every waking moment trying to figure out how to do that thing. Again, that's the hard way of doing it. Don't do it that way.
Mhm. Well, I love, okay. So I think I've been doing my podcast for 2 years, and I think I've only asked 2 questions and you had so much content.
Oh, no,
So
I'm so sorry. I know. I've been a total yak
no, no.
bag. I
Do you know
acknowledge
what
that.
it is? I know what it is, Josh. Do you know what it is? It's your strength of communication. So people see that they have that strength of communication. And I bet you've got it like in that top five,
Ah,
is that it's not
there,
about it's they're great storytellers, but they get their energy from verbally talking.
yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
so when you said you could do a podcast every day and it was okay. Well, I think it's a combination of all the things you've just been talking about with trying new things and having a habit, but I also think it gives you energy. Is that
Yeah, it
right?
does. If you know, it's what's really interesting though. Some might look or they might be listening to me and they say, "Oh, this guy's such an extrovert. I'm not an extrovert. I can't do that." I'll share a secret with you. It's not a secret. I'll share an interesting tidbit with you. It's not like, oh, I'm going to reveal a secret. But it's really interesting. I would say so. We've launched now about 250 B2B podcasts through Up My Influence. And we have, it's called our podcast leader network. And again, we're all go-givers. We're all pretty high authority, all already established business leaders and owners. Like it's just a really good culture to be a part of. But an interesting thing, I thought that at the beginning, a lot of our clients were going to be kind of that extroverted, want to be on stages. Well, more than 50% of our clients, a majority of our clients would absolutely peg themselves as introverted. Um, and here's I have a couple of ideas on why this is the case. I'm not a pure extrovert. After this interview, I need to decompress. Like I am thrilled being in the moment and leaving it on the mat. But then afterwards, like for speaking, for example, it is a known thing that I bake into my schedule no matter what's going on. I do not go from speaking to a bunch of other business activity. I say, listen, it is part of my contract. Schedule wise, we're going to have to work together on this. I can be a little bit flexible. But after I'm done speaking, I'm happy to circulate, 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour at most. But you're going to need to build in an hour where you're not going to see me. And I'm going to go and decompress. And I'm probably going to go back up to the hotel room, just lay down, chill, play some games on my iPad. I jealously covet my downtime. Without my downtime, without my off time or my vacation time or my time with my wife or my kids or my hobby time, going to play bass, I'm just no good. I'm not able to do what I want to do. So part of it, I don't know, maybe my stage in life, but I don't want to hustle 24/7. That doesn't appeal to me. I love staying in my zone of genius. I would rather spend 4 to 6 hours a day working in my zone of genius and then doing my own, just whatever I want to do for the rest of the day, rather than kind of working at a slower pace. Like I'll bust my tail for 4 to 6 hours. I don't want to work 8 to 10 or 12 doing half work. And then I'm distracted. I'm looking at stuff. Like if I'm on and I'm at work, I could care less about Facebook, but when I'm on downtime. Like I feel like when we can better compartmentalize our life, that is such a superpower. Those of us who have that ability to compartmentalize and stay in focus. But again, I think those of us who jealously covet their downtime are probably better at compartmentalizing. That's my speculation.
Well, I think you've got good boundaries. It's really about
Oh,
managing yourself and what your boundaries are. And it's like, your gift, but you know its
yeah.
limits and you know how when you have to turn up and on. So as we get ready to close out,
Mm,
can you, Josh, I'm interested for those people out there that are curious about advice that you would give them for somebody who's struggling to align with their true self.
mm,
They're trying to be something they're not, and it doesn't feel in alignment,
yeah,
like the alignment you've been
sure.
describing. So what are some things that you found that have helped you
Yep.
and even the people you work with
Number one,
that
number one by a
alignment?
country mile. Go talk with a lot of humans about what you do. You just need to be talking with lots of people. And you're testing out what you're talking about. You're seeing how does it feel? You're thinking about what you said and how they responded afterwards. And you have to be very, very curious about yourself and be willing to whatever your idea is. So I think a lot of us unfortunately will hear a bright idea or like something will come to our brain and they'll be like, okay, I'm supposed to do it like that. Like for example, when I started podcasting, I did it like a lot of other podcasters at first. um, and eventually, and you hear this a lot in podcasting, you get to a point where you quote unquote find your voice. And when you find your voice, it's an evolution. It doesn't happen. It's like, oh, I woke up and I found my voice. But it's a process. Okay. But the first off, the doing is where the power is, right? Go to Hamburg and do 3,000 hours on a stage. You'll either decide really quickly that's not for me, but if you are just hanging back and thinking and processing and planning and trying to make it perfect before you make any moves, that is a probably the worst thing that you could do. I was just talking to a friend right now, and he wants to start a podcast. And I said, "Well, tell me about what your journey's been." Well, he said, "Well, I've been planning it for the past 6 months." And I didn't say this because he didn't ask for my coaching, but I mean, if he did ask for my coaching, I'd say, well, can I just tell you, I think you're doing it completely backwards. Because what you should do is just like paint. Like if you want to get good at painting, like what you can watch 1,000 hours of painting videos, or you can spend 1,000 hours with paint and brushes. You tell me at the end of those two people what is going to happen at the end of each of those thousand hours? Who do you think is going to probably be a lot more comfortable? I find that the people that spend all of their time in the paralysis of analysis, they constantly have stage fright. It's like for our clients, I'm asking them, listen, you're not going to be a bigger than life podcaster. You don't have to be like me. You be like you, right? But you're just going to be a moderator. And a lot of our clients are still a little nervous about that, right? Because and again, through the podcast, ultimately, look, I'm not a podcasting consultant. I'm a chief revenue officer. We're going to use the podcast to help them become a household name in their industry, and then I'm going to use that podcast to get them networking with the A-listers in their industry. Through those relationships, they're going to end up making a lot of money. Clients commonly will make 6 and 7 figures in their first year. And so it's a different way of doing business. It's a go-giver way of doing business. But those are the two things. Number one, talk with a lot of people. So listen, if you happen to be collaborating on content on social media or podcast or YouTube or whatever, that is naturally baked in. You're naturally going to get good at what you're doing. And number two, you're just out there doing the thing for a length of time. And it's not to say that if something is absolutely not working, that you shouldn't stop and adjust and pivot or whatever. You should do that, but don't do it out of fear. Do it because, no, the math indicates that this is not a good path, right? Not every business. And by the way, do not use, I'm going to say this emphatically. I spend a couple of hours a day using AI enabled tools like ChatGPT. Do not use ChatGPT for business advice. It will tell you everything is a brilliant idea. Okay, that's the way that all the AI tools are designed right now. Unless you can find like a really good custom GPT, they're all designed to just edify the heck out of you and make you feel like $1 million and think everything you say out of your mouth is genius. Like I forget, the sycophancy is like through the roof normally with ChatGPT. So don't do that. But talk with real people that have been in the trenches and have done the thing, because people like a good coach is probably they're paid to be very honest with you. Like if you come and work with me, like I'm not gonna, like we're gonna, like everything we have to do needs to have business justification. We have to get ROI. I'm a revenue officer. I'm not a here's how to spend your money officer. Like I got to get money quickly. Anyway, sorry. I'm looking at the clock. I just want to honor our
Yeah,
time
yeah,
together.
yeah. That's good. Okay. Well, one last thing. How did you create your own title? Chief Revenue Officer. How did you come
Oh,
up with
that's
that?
really okay. So can I tell
And
you
we'll
this?
end with that.
I'll give a quick answer because I want to be respectful of our time together. That was not my idea. Someone said, "Why, Josh? You're like so." Like when I was describing what I was doing, I wasn't using that term. This is a little while ago, and I had a client who said, "Why aren't you calling yourself a revenue officer?" I'm like, "Well, because that feels a little audacious." He goes, Josh, listen, people don't know what to call you until you tell them how you identify, right? So if you say that you're a chief revenue officer, well, that's fine. I mean, you have to be able to back it up. Do you feel like you, in theory, could back that up? I said, yes. I mean, that's what he said. Look at your results. You're helping people like you just helped this client close a 7-figure deal. Like if that's not a chief revenue officer, a fractional chief revenue officer, virtual chief revenue officer, whatever caveat you want to throw in there. But listen, you need to own that, my brother. And I said, okay, I'm uncomfortable with that. He goes, yeah, I know you're uncomfortable with that. That's because of, humility or whatever. Okay. But sometimes we need that friend to help us to own our greatness. Because I think most of us with a good heart, it's very rare that you find someone that's got that level of arrogance or, kind of like most people are not that way. Okay, we're not egotistical in that way. It is uncomfortable for us to try on a new role. But what I would say is test it in a couple of conversations. When someone asks what you do, take that next title. I mean, if you can, obviously, if you're working for somebody else, don't take a title that's not yours. But certainly, think about who you are and what how you describe yourself. Go ahead and test a couple of other titles and watch how people respond. Can I tell you this? When I got very clear about my role, who I am to my client, my sales conversion rate increased by about 25% across the board. And
Bingo.
and
There's your alignment,
people,
right?
this is the biggest thing. People treated me differently. That was the biggest thing I noticed right out of the gate. I'm not getting people treating me like I'm just some person selling a service, some vendor or whatever. They treated me like the leader that I showed up to the meeting as. Even if on the inside, I felt a little uncomfortable with that at first. Now, I'm not as uncomfortable with it. Because that's the role that people need me to be. They don't need me to be a vendor. What they need is a leader. Do I have the ability to fill in and share that leadership burden within their organization? 100%. I've done it a couple hundred times now. Dear God, I should have some comfort level in doing that. So again, I needed a friend. And that's another reason why I suggest you should work with a coach or consultant who does stuff like this so that you can step into your greatness because you deserve it. The world deserves it. And the next person that you get to be of service to, they deserve it.
Oh, that's a great way to end. Thank you so much today, Josh, for helping. And great content. So thank you. And I've really enjoyed your energy and hearing all of your great ideas and suggestions. So
Dana,
thank you.
it's been such a joy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Sure. Thanks so much for joining me on Dominate Your Day. I'm Dana Williams, and I've loved spending time with you. And if today's episode sparked something for you, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to use their strengths to make a difference. And hey, I'd love for you to stay connected. So visit our website at danawilliamsco.com, and you can get all kinds of resources and inspiration there. Until next time, keep showing up, leading authentically, and dominating your day.